Now at Lowe's, faster quotes start at the Lowe's Pro Desk. Got a material list handwritten on a sticky note or saved as a photo? Perfect. Bring it to us and get a quote in minutes. And if you don't see what you need on the shelf, we'll help you get it. You can access thousands of products beyond what's available in-store or on Lowes.com, right from the Lowe's Pro Desk. Build quotes faster and source the materials you need to keep your jobs moving. Just like that, at Lowe's.
You are listening to Hilary Topper on Air. And now, here's your host, Hilary Topper.
Hello and welcome to Hilary Topper on Air, the show that brings you inspiring stories and expert advice to help you in business and in life. Today, we're diving into a topic that affects nearly everyone, but is often misunderstood, and that's estate planning. Specifically, we'll be exploring the powerful role that trust can play in securing your assets and ensuring your wishes are carried out. To help us navigate this important subject, I'm thrilled to welcome Deanna Eble, who is a partner at the renowned Russo Law Group, PC. She has extensive experience helping families protect their future through smart and strategic estate planning. So, Deanna, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Hilary.
So, to get started, many people have heard the word trust, but they may not know exactly what that means. Could you break it down for us? Like, what is a trust in context of estate planning?
Okay, so a trust is a document that covers conceptually what happens with the assets that the trust is holding in your lifetime, and also what happens with the assets that the trust is holding on your death. So let's make it simple. If a trust is holding your house, the trust probably says that in your lifetime you get to live in the house. And then on your passing, it can be distributed to your children, sold and distributed to your children, something simple like that.
Okay, so can you talk to us a little bit about some of the key benefits? Why would
Absolutely.
somebody set up a trust?
Absolutely. So the reason why I think this topic is such an important topic is because I think that it is scary for people to hear the concept because it seems somewhat overwhelming. We're very comfortable with the concept of a will because Hollywood always has these big dramatic will readings, and we all understand what a will is. But at the end of the day, I think that in the pandemic in particular, people started to realize that a will isn't necessarily the best option for everything because, unfortunately, during the pandemic, an abundance of people passed from that disease. And the courts were not only working at a half the rate because they were working from home some of the time and working in the office some of the time, but with so many more people passing, having to use the probate process, which is the process of administering a will, families started to understand that, wait a minute, I don't want my kids and my family members to go through this when I pass, because look at what I'm dealing with. It's taking a year and a half or longer to collect things that I should have collected, 6 months after someone passed. So the concept of the trust is in its simplest form. It not only explains to everybody, and it's like a storybook. Chapter 1 says, hey, I want to be able to do this with the assets while I'm alive. And then it goes on when you pass, what happens. And the people who passed during the pandemic who had a trust in place did not need the courts to administer anything. Their family members or the trustee that they named to administer their trust just stepped in and did everything. So, houses that were owned by trusts, those families were able to take advantage of this boom of people moving out to Long Island during the pandemic and put the house on the market right away and strike while there was a lot of hot opportunity for getting more than asking.
Mhm.
What we do a lot is trusts are oftentimes in our world used in probably three or four different components. The first component is somebody who says, look, my family had to deal with probating my mother's estate and the courts took forever and it was such a tedious process. I don't want to have to do that. I don't want my family to have to do that when I pass. And they do a revocable trust, which is just giving full access to the person who creates the trust to use and enjoy the money and the assets owned by the trust however they want, however they're currently using it, but avoiding that whole probate process so that the courts aren't involved on their passing. We also do a lot of irrevocable trust work. Well, what does that mean? An irrevocable trust is a trust that is established where the person establishing it is essentially giving up access to certain items. So, where do we see that? We see that most often when somebody comes to us and says, hey, I'm looking to protect my assets for my long-term care costs. What if I need a nursing home and then in 5 years, I want to be able to protect my assets so that my family doesn't have to spend everything down on my care. So they may put a house or some cash in an irrevocable trust. And then if I set that up, I am giving up my opportunity to maybe go to the bank and take the cash out and use it for myself. But at the same time, it's there, it's owned by the trust, it has some protection after being owned by the trust for 5 years. So if I get sick, my kids don't have to use that money to pay for my care. I'm eligible, assuming everything else meets the criteria. I could be eligible for Medicaid. Um, and so that's huge, especially, most people want to try and protect at least their house and the value of their house for their kids as an inheritance, because we are often faced with Long Islanders being house rich, cash poor. Our houses are worth such a significant amount that if we could protect that for our family to inherit, that's huge for us. Um, Other ways that people also use trust is, and I encourage this, is if you have a family member who has special needs and they themselves are on some type of government benefit, you don't want to be in a position where they don't get to inherit at all from anybody because you don't want them to lose their benefits if they get an inheritance. And so you establish a trust for them so that the trust can protect their assets for the foreseeable future and they can maintain their benefits. Yes, there are multiple different types of trusts that we do in that situation, but I just like people to understand that there's an option and that you don't want to disinherit, for example, a child or give give that child's money to one of the other children and say, here, I'm going to give you 2/3 of the estate so that you could take care of Johnny. Because if something happens to Sarah, for example, and she was supposed to take care of Johnny, then the money that she's holding for him ends up going through her estate and to her family instead of being earmarked for Johnny. So if you leave it for Johnny and let Sarah be the trustee for it, it's still Johnny's money. It's still there for Johnny. And lastly, people will also use trusts as a way to minimize estate taxes. There's multiple different types of trusts that can be used to minimize someone's exposure to estate taxes. And that's another key way that the families use trusts as a way of planning instead of just relying on a will.
So, who should set up a trust? I mean, is it mostly for wealthy people or should everyone do it?
I mean, my answer would be everyone. Most of my clients are more, middle class. I often joke where, we're too rich to be poor, but too poor to be rich, that concept. Like their house may be worth $500,000 or more, and they may have little bits of cash, but you still want to protect the value of the house because you worked so hard for that. I think that in a lot of circumstances, trusts are good for almost anybody, and that it's a great idea to have a conversation with a professional to understand which trusts work best for you, and which trust is going to accomplish the goals that you're setting for yourself.
So let's kind of switch gears. We
Sure.
we decide that we want to set up a trust, right? And we put our beneficiaries in place. However, maybe our beneficiaries aren't very good with money. Maybe they have some challenges. Um, what would you recommend in that situation?
So a lot of times when that scenario arises, I often recommend trusts are multifaceted. So you could have a trust that names beneficiaries, and then the beneficiaries might be, hey, in the scenario that Hillary's giving me, I'm not the best. I'm one of the beneficiaries, but I'm not great at managing money, or I'm just easily influenced by people. And I don't have to have a disability or anything. That's my personality. And so maybe my mom is setting that trust up and she recognizes that, and she has my share stay in trust for me so that my sister can manage that money for me, and I am able to use the money for sound purposes and make sound decisions with it, but I'm not easily influenced by anybody just stepping in and taking it away from me.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about was what are some of the misconceptions that you hear about in trust? Like, I think that, again, people think it's for wealthy, so what other kind of misconceptions are out there that you can debunk?
I love that question, Hillary. Um, One of the biggest misconceptions I think people have with trust is that there's some ongoing fee. And usually, when you're initially setting up the trust, like if I set up a trust and I put my house in it to protect it in some format, there's no fees being paid up front because maybe if it's a revocable trust, I'm the trustee and I'm managing it and avoiding probate. If I set up the trust and I put my house in there because I want to plan for long-term care costs, and my kids are the trustees, really they're not doing anything except letting me live in the house and pay all the expenses. And so there's no fee for that. Oftentimes, while there can be trusts that have yearly fees for management, most of the trusts that people are looking to do in a planning world right now are trusts that are established, and the fees aren't associated with them until they're distributing the assets. They're getting ready to um, pay out the beneficiaries. Those are the most often where you see fees. And so sometimes people are afraid to do a trust because they think that it's going to be an ongoing cost to them. And that's not necessarily the case. There are those occasional ones that do have that, but it's the large majority of the clients that I see, that's not the case. There's really only trustee commissions paid when they're distributing things.
Let's talk a little bit about co-op and condo boards, right?
Okay.
So somebody, buys a co-op or a condo and they want to put the condo or co-op in a trust. Can you talk us through that? Like, is that like a
Absolutely.
difficult thing to do or
Absolutely.
yeah.
A condo is probably easier because
Uh-huh.
a condo is often just a deed. So we could do a deed transfer, and just like you own your own freestanding house, we could do a deed transfer and have the trust own the property. You change the name on the deed to go from you as the owner. So instead of Hilary Topper owning the property, it would be Hilary Topper's family trust owns the property. A co-op is a little bit more of a I don't want to say misnomer, a little bit more of a work in process. So when it's a revocable trust, where you still have full use and enjoyment and control over the assets, um, more co-op boards will allow for the transfer of the shares of your co-op into that type of trust. And they do a closing just like you did a closing to take possession of the property, and they reissue the stock and the lease to be owned in the name of the trust. Um, I am doing this for 24 years, and I will tell you that in that time, more and more co-op boards are allowing for the transfer of the shares into an irrevocable trust, which is in the example I gave you before, the trust that we often use when we're doing planning for long-term care costs. Why are we seeing that trend? We're seeing that trend because more and more co-op members, the board members, are starting to do their own planning, and they recognize the importance of this type of planning. So the key to doing transfers of your co-op to the trust is first to find out from the co-op board themselves, what do they allow and which trust is sufficient for them. Once, even if they say, yes, we could do the transfer, and regardless of what trust it is, they do still have a process. They do still look for the drafting attorney to send their co-op attorney a copy of the trust to read through, because oftentimes what they like to see is language that says, if for some reason there isn't continuity over what happens between the beneficiaries of the co-op and the co-op board, then they want to make it clear that the trust states that for the co-op, when we're talking specifically about the co-op, the proprietary lease takes precedent. And so that's one of those things that I've seen often when somebody is looking, regardless of whether it's a revocable trust or an irrevocable trust, they always want to make sure that there's language to protect the co-op from outside influence or outside direction. They want everybody to be under the same guidelines through the proprietary lease. And so that's often they will look for us as attorneys to put certain language in. And so you want to make sure that we are, as attorneys, are having an open dialogue with the co-op to make sure that we're getting all the information and setting everything up the way that they're looking to set it up, while we're still protecting your interest. But
That's
co-ops are probably the ones that are the most difficult, but not impossible. And it's because it's shares in a community, and they want to make sure that everybody is on the same page in how they function.
hmm, that's so interesting. So for our listeners who
Yes.
are thinking about setting up a trust, can you walk us through the steps?
Yeah. So I think the first step really is to have a conversation with your attorney about what your goals are and what you're looking to accomplish. Because that's where you have the conversation and understand which trust works best for you. It's not a cookie cutter world. We don't say, oh, this person is in their mid 70s, and so we're going to do an irrevocable trust, or hey, this person is in their early 60s, we're going to do a revocable trust. So it's really, what are your goals? I've had clients where, for example, they're married, they didn't have any children. Their goal at the end of the day was to leave whatever was left after the survivor passes to nieces and nephews, but they wanted to make sure that everything was available for their full use and enjoyment. So it didn't matter to them from a Medicaid standpoint. They wanted to be able to spend their money on them. And so I did a revocable trust for that couple because they wanted full use and access of their assets, but understanding that their ultimate disposition was to 10 different nieces and nephews all over the United States.
Wow.
They didn't want probate to be messy, so they did a revocable trust to make sure that it was easy to just transfer to the nieces and nephews. Whereas somebody like my mom, she is at a point now where she's saying, I'm worried about protecting what little bit I have left. And I want to make sure that my sisters, she wants to make sure my sisters and I are getting that. And so she's looking down the road and she's doing an irrevocable trust to protect her assets. But understand one thing, when I talk about irrevocable trust, I would never put every asset you own in an irrevocable trust. You need to have money in your name available to you so you don't feel destitute. So I would always want to make sure that there's something left behind for you to have to use and enjoy because, Medicaid, you may never go on Medicaid. And if you do, you can have money in your name. There's a threshold that you can have in your name, and even if you're a little bit over that, there's always something that we could do with you 1 foot in a hospital, 1 foot in a nursing home. The idea of the irrevocable trust is to protect the bulk of the assets. You have 500, $600,000 of assets between a house and cash, and you want to protect the bulk of that. Let's do that. Make sure that there's some protection there. And when I'm having that conversation with a client about their goals, one of the things that we often discuss is it may not even be that you want to do an irrevocable trust for the purpose of letting your family inherit from you. Sometimes it's just you want to do an irrevocable trust and set money aside that your kids have access to so that if you needed to supplement what Medicaid is providing, they don't have to have a family meeting with their spouses and everything to decide, can I take money out of my monthly income and our household income to support my mom or support my dad? It's just your children having a conversation. Hey, there's money set aside here. Do we want to forego the inheritance and have access in some convoluted way to money to supplement it? Medicaid might be providing 8 hours a day at home, and we want 24/7. And there's money set aside that we might be able to access to do that. So it's all in understanding what your goals are and what your picture looks like at the end of the day and what you're hoping to accomplish in that picture that helps determine where we're going, what trust works. And the other thing is life happens and life changes. So you could set something up today. You could set up a revocable trust today. And then, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years down the road, you say, you know what? I think that I'm at a point in my life where I'm comfortable with everything that I have access to, and I don't want to jeopardize my family not getting what's here. So I want to amend my revocable trust and make it irrevocable. Or I named my children equally as beneficiaries, but I've been supporting one child a little bit more than the rest. And regardless of the type of trust it is, I'd like to go in and change the beneficiaries. Irrevocable trusts give, with the right language in it, give you the option to still be able to change the ultimate beneficiary. So you know me, Hillary, I'm always joking with clients because this is such serious stuff. We need to make lighten it a little. And so I always let my clients know that you still have the authority to tell your kids, be nice to me or I'm going to disinherit you, even when you do an irrevocable trust. They
That's
need to
all.
have control.
Love it. This was such a great advice. Thank you so much, Deanna, for being on the show. Could you tell our listeners how to get in touch with you and the Russo Law Group?
Absolutely. So you can reach out. Our phone number is 516-683-1717. And you could always ask the receptionist to for my extension, and she'll be happy to make that transfer. We also have a website, which is VJRusso, RUSSO, law, LAW.com, where you could get lots of information and find out more about us. We're so excited because in October we celebrated our 40th year. And so there's lots of good stuff on our website that you can read about, and blogs that we've done, and just so much information that will help you dive into this whole trust concept. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody.
Special thanks to the Russo Law Group, Long Island's estate planning, elder law, and special needs law firm. For more information, contact vjrussolaw.com. That's V as in Victor, jrussolaw.com. And Playtry. Everything swim, bike, and run. For more information on Playtry, go to Playtry, playtry.com/store. Or for franchise opportunities, go to playtry.com, and you could own your own swim, bike, and run store locally.
Hey there, it's Wayfair here, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app, when you spot it, a brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's Room of Choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.